Welcome to The Explainer. So, what happens when one of the world's biggest superpowers starts making history-altering decisions based on a gut feeling? Today, we're going to break down how a single hunch might have completely redrawn the geopolitical map.
We'll kick things off with that one intuitive decision. Then we're going to trace the ripple effects, from the heartbreaking consequences on the ground to a Europe that's now forced to figure out its own place in the world. And it all leads up to a brand new great power game.
Okay, let's dive right into the heart of it. How did this whole thing even start? Well, according to our source, it wasn't because of some smoking gun or a UN resolution. Nope. It was something way more personal and a lot more unpredictable.
Just let that sink in for a second. The entire intelligence community, we're talking the FBI, the Pentagon, all of it was apparently just pushed to the side. What the source is saying here is that foreign policy at the highest level was guided by a personal feeling. It sets a really dangerous precedent, right? Where instinct suddenly matters more than intelligence.
Our source even has a name for this, the intuition doctrine. And what it does is basically create a policy-making echo chamber. I mean, think about it. When you're making huge decisions without any pushback or without the grounding of hard data from your own intel agencies, the chance for a catastrophic mistake just skyrockets.
All right, so what happens when a policy that started as a hunch slams into the cold, hard reality of war? Well, as we're about to see, the consequences are both tragic and ultimately undeniable.
The source material points to this one moment as a huge turning point in the story, a truly devastating missile strike. And what's so important here is that this wasn't just an accusation. It was a tragic mistake that was later confirmed by the US itself. And the human cost was just staggering. The source cites a death toll of over 170 schoolgirls. And that's not just a statistic, that number represents an immense, irreversible tragedy right at the center of this conflict.
And yet, faced with this tragedy, the official response wasn't, let's investigate, or let's find out what happened. As the source shows us, it was just a wall of denial, an immediate, flat-out rejection that something like this could even happen.
And this is where you can see the massive gap between the official story and what was actually happening. In one column, you have the narrative. It was a military complex. And in the other, you have the proof, a confirmed school strike backed up by video. It's a really powerful picture of what they call the fog of war. The source makes a really grim but essential point here. The decision to launch a huge bombing campaign is also a decision to accept that civilians will die. It's not a bug, it's a feature of that decision. The argument is you just can't wage war on this scale and not get blood on your hands.
So, a war that started with a hunch has now led to tragedy. Now let's look at the first big geopolitical shockwave, because an entire continent, Europe, is suddenly forced to deal with its own role in this new, very unstable world.
For Europe, this whole situation creates a kind of existential crisis. I mean, the country that's supposed to be your main security partner is now seen as unpredictable. So, what do? The continent is truly at a crossroads, and it has to find a new way forward.
The solution being floated is a serious push for real autonomy, and it really breaks down into two big pieces. First, you've got economy and energy. Basically, break free from relying on foreign countries by going all in on renewables and nuclear. And second, defense. Stop acting like 27 different little armies and start thinking like one, building up industry together, buying weapons as a group, and getting to a point where you can act on your own.
But, there's a huge difference between wanting that and actually doing it. The path to autonomy is littered with roadblocks. You've got deep political divisions, a defense industry where countries are competing instead of cooperating, and maybe most importantly, this ongoing critical reliance on American military technology.
Okay, so let's zoom out now and take a look at how this leadership vacuum is being filled on the world stage.
And this is where we see two totally different ideas about global influence clashing. The US is still leaning on hard power, military bases, alliances, direct intervention. But China is playing the long game with soft power. They're building ports, roads, digital networks. It's not about conquering land. It's about weaving this web of economic dependency.
And that, of course, creates a really dangerous strategic calculation. Analysts in the source are debating whether China looks at this situation and sees a window of opportunity. With America's attention and resources spread thin, could this be the moment that Beijing decides to finally make a move on Taiwan?
To really see how these huge global pressures trickle all the way down into a country's internal politics,
Our source gives us a fascinating case study. Spain, in the political tightrope it's now being forced to walk. And here you see a major international crisis getting filtered through the messy reality of domestic politics. The government takes this really popular no-to-war position on the world stage, but at home, the opposition attacks them, saying they didn't follow the right procedures. It's a perfect example of how internal rivalries can just tie a country's hands when it comes to foreign policy.
And here's the paradox. This international crisis actually becomes a political lifeline at home. As the source puts it, a leader who looked like a political corpse was suddenly reborn by wrapping himself in that no-to-war flag. He basically turned global instability into his own political strength.
And all of this brings us to one final, really crucial question. In this new world, a world of shifting powers and unpredictable allies, is letting domestic political fights dictate your foreign policy a luxury that any country can actually afford anymore?